You know, I've spent a long time looking for the perfect plexi. I've owned many of them. Original plexis, I've had a vintage one, I've had the reissues, the 50 watt, the 100 watt reissue. I had the new Studio Vintage plexi style amp. I own a 2061, which is a kind of a different Marshall amp, but kind of based on the plexi. I've had the I actually have the Friedman small box, which is kind of a take on a plexi. The Sir Badger, I've tried the Bogner's version of the plexi. Every plexi I've tried never really gets fully close enough to the plexi, or they do something that's really cool. Like they give you the more gain version of a plexi, where it kind of sounds like it's, you know, cranked up at a lower volume, or it has a tube screamer in front of it. But I've always wanted something more. A couple months ago, I reviewed the Amplified Nation Overdrive Reverb, which was Amplified Nation's take on like the ultimate Dumble. You really liked that video, by the way, because the views went really, really well and the interaction was really, really well. And I love that amp. I thought it had a magic to it that just kind of blew me away. And I asked the owner and designer, Taylor Cox, to come on the podcast. I'll put a link down below so you can check that out. And when I was interviewing him and we were learning so much about Dumbles and his amps, he mentioned that he makes a Fender style Bassman or a Bassman style amp. And of course, if you know, Marshalls were originally copied off the Fender Bassman. And so I was like, oh, like a Bassman plexi. And he's like, yes. And that got me intrigued. But then what he said next got me obsessed, and I had to try one, which is he made some modifications, and the modifications are beautiful. So first, before we start, let's just talk about the way this thing looks. Amplified Nation is a custom amp builder. So when you go on their website, you can design the amp to be whatever you want. If you want a traditional looking amp, you want a more modern amp, if you want just a custom looking, high-end looking amp, if you want to do something crazy like this, snakeskin with colored knobs, whatever you want, they'll make it so it looks like your amp. In other words, you'll be one of the few people to have it because it's your design. The other thing that's interesting about it is he has amp choices. For instance, this is the 50 watt, but they make a 22 watt, the 50 watt, and the 100 watt version, and you can choose the tubes. I have EL34s in this, but you could get the 6L6s. It has 2 channels, but more importantly, I want to start with what it has above what a normal plexi style amp would have. It has reverb. This is an analog reverb that has a tube and a reverb tank, and it sounds beautiful. He also added an effects loop. Now, I've seen effects loops in Marshalls. Even the new Marshall Studio has an effects loop, but the fact that it has the effects loop and the reverb is a really nice feature. Then you have 2 channels, and essentially what you have is, like, I'm going to call it the main plexi channel, which is a volume, treble, bass with a bright switch. This is going to give you like a plexi. It's going to sound clean at lower volumes and break up and sound beautiful and have a huge punchy sound, and it's going to get unruly loud when you want it to. Then you have the second channel. This has a gain control master volume. You have a treble, middle, and bass, and of course a bright switch. This is going to give you the plexi style amps at lower volumes. Of course, you can turn them up, or a more hot rodded plexi, but then take you almost into Soldano territory. So it's pretty impressive. I want to start with the first channel. The first thing it does is what I love about Bassmans and plexis. It's clean, but man, does it want to break up as soon as you give it a little. That is just fantastic. Now, of course, if you run a single coil, which we will in a minute, or you back the volume off, beautiful. And of course, the reverb is that reverb you saw on the last Amplified Nation, where it's big. Sounds amazing. Okay, so we'll turn that down. Now, let's turn this control here. Let's give it a little bit. Now I want to show you what happens when you give it just a little bit of volume. That's great. fantastic. It is plexi all the way. Okay, so again, if you want to clean it up, you just run the volume down a little bit. Now this is where it gets exciting. If we go to the second channel, to me it's definitely the plexi territory, it's the Marshalls, but it doesn't have the punch anymore. It's not throwing a lot of volume to the speaker, and that's probably a good time to mention. I'm running it through a Greenback Celestion 112, mic'd up with an SM57. This is absolutely the best plexi sounding amp I've ever heard. But again, let's run the gain now. Let's turn it up. This is definitely a more modernized plexi where it's a lot more gain. Or really the plexi where you have a plexi just turn to full volume, all knobs just going. Okay, let's go for broke. Now here's where it gets interesting. I'm running it now just about 1 o'clock, in other words, just past the 12 o'clock part. Now this is the highest gain that I like the amp. As you go past this, it's gonna get muddier, but more importantly, a lot bassier. It's adding a lot low end. But right here, it's definitely in the Soldano territory of just a higher gain amp. If we keep going, you'll see it's going to get real sludgy. So it's not my favorite then, so like I said, we'll back that off. So what I've done now is I've gone back to the first channel and I'm switched to a Strat. I'm on position 4. Okay, let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to turn the bright switch off and run the treble at 10 and run a little bit more volume and you get this. That's what I love. That's the basement and plexi I love with a Strat. Sounds huge. Especially if we go to the neck position, you get those big notes. That sounds great. So there you have it, the ultimate plexi amp. Like I said, you can make it look however you want. I thought this was crazy when they sent this to me, but I have to say it's grown on me as being a little outrageous. And you know, it's kind of a nice thing because it kind of brings in all the elements. It's got the Bassman look, it's got a little bit of the Marshall look, it's definitely got the Soldano look. It looks great. This is probably the most versatile sounding and most accurate sounding Fender Bassman / Marshall Plexi sound I've ever heard. And I have to say, Taylor has nailed it and then shot it to the stratosphere as far as I'm concerned. The saying goes, jack of all trades and master of none, and that does not apply to this amp. This amp just nails everything. Now, I mentioned it has 2 channels. I should say this before we go. It has a switch here that you can switch between the 2 channels. It also includes a foot switch with a 8-pin cable that allows you to switch between the channels as well. On that note, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. And as always, thank you for your time and know your gear.